going so far?
So far so good. I'm in Oakland at the moment, so I had to get up at like 4:30 to try to get my stuff together for y'all this morning. So I've been up and going for a little while now.
Well, you look amazing. Thank you very much for waking up early. I know waking up early on a Sunday is not great, so thank you for all that.
It's all good. It's well worth it.
That's great. So let's start out with an easy question. Who is Bonnie Violet to Bonnie Violet?
Oh, who is Bonnie Violet to Bonnie Violet? It probably depends on the day, if I'm honest, um, and the time, which I'm sure most of us can probably relate to. Bonnie Violet for me is my drag name, but it is also my name that I go by during the day. I spelled a little fancier in drag, with numbers and symbols and things like that. But I actually named myself after my grandmothers. I have a grandma Bonnie on my father's side and a grandma Violet on my mother's side. And so that's where Bonnie Violet came from. Yeah, I mean, I started transitioning almost a year ago that I came out to my family. I came out to my family a year ago next week about being trans. And so to me, I think Bonnie Violet, just in that sense, is really just an identifier of drag, which was something that I did as part of my recovery. As somebody who's clean and sober, I got in drag to raise money for our like recovery community. And then through doing drag, I also came to notice and that I was trans, and I was able to kind of be in a space in which I could kind of find that out about myself and really put on things that I'd always wanted to, but I never really felt safe to, whether it was at home or at church or anywhere else really. And so I really love that I'm in a place in my life where I can just explore and express more of who I am. And to me, that's a deeply spiritual experience. And it's a direct result of my seeking some sort of connection with a thing I often call God and sometimes have a hard time calling God.
Completely see that. How was a little off of the of what you mentioned earlier? Like, how were you accepted among the community that you were a part of when you decided to come out as trans? Because I know that that's definitely, even among the gay community, it's not 100% considered to be something positive, and if anything, sometimes our own community ridicules our trans family members, and which is not right, obviously. But like, how was your experience when that happened?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely had kind of a mix of experiences. Most of the people that were close to me in life, like I been living trans and saw myself as trans much longer. But a year ago is when it kindly made it, well, probably 2 years ago, I came out to the recovery community, um, which was a big deal for me, and was the scariest for me, maybe next to coming out to my parents, just because the recovery community had been so, um, I mean, it was where I found God, and it was also where I could like, I felt safe and in a way that I'd never really felt before. And I was really scared to lose that. And I had experiences in trying to create gender inclusive space, or, I'd been using she pronouns for years, but nobody ever really honored that in the rooms, but I never really asked them either. And so they actually responded pretty well. Most of the people in my life were not surprised. They were like, oh, I never really thought about that, but yeah, that makes sense. Like it didn't feel like it was incongruent with who I am and what my journey has been. Um, so but it has been really interesting, to go from being socialized as a gay male to now being a trans femme person. you kind of are no longer a part of like the gay man community. And that had been such a big part of my life and my recovery. So that's been an interesting thing to try to find new community, because I definitely don't quite fit in the same ways that I used to. My mother is good. My brother is good. My nephews call me Bonnie. My dad, my dad has actively tried not to visibly see me for 3+ years. And I finally told him last year, and he definitely made it known that he didn't want to see me. And I spent Christmas with them, with my family, finally, for the first time in years. And he ignored me for 5 days, didn't talk with me, nothing. So I think in time he'll come around, but it's definitely been a really difficult thing for him. Like, he actually at Christmas time said that his gay son could come home, but not Bonnie Violet. And I was like, I can't really leave Bonnie Violet at the door. So, I just came as I was, and it was a little uncomfortable for him, I think, and for me. But I just did my best to just, be who I was and be authentic while I was there with them.
I appreciate you sharing that. Especially the whole idea of community, because it's like that is definitely something that everyone craves. Especially if you're not accepted among your own family members, you need to find that community that can completely accept your true authentic self. And I can see that you definitely found that community. So I'm really happy for that.
Thank you.
So let's talk about your spiritual path. Tell us, since you mentioned that transness is connected to your spirituality. Let's talk more about that.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in Idaho of like 3,000 people. I grew up in a trailer with my mom, my dad, and my younger brother, who's like 2 years younger than me. The first queer thing I did was go to church. People in my family did not go to church. They weren't church-going folk. And so for me, it was a place that I could go to kind of escape from home. I had, growing up, my dad was an addict, an alcoholic. He smoked crack and did all sorts of things until I was about 12 years old. I don't remember much of my childhood below the age of 12. I think some of it has to do with just the environment that I was growing up in. But I also had an experience when I was 5. I witnessed a traumatic experience and I went mute and I wasn't able to speak for a long time. I never learned about this or knew anything about this until my mid-20s. But because of this thing that had happened and this trauma thing that was happening to me, I would cry and I would kind of freak out. And I hysterically cry, and whenever there was potential conflict or whatever growing up. And so that made it really difficult for me, especially at home, because my dad was always, I wasn't sitting right, or I had my hands on my face, or I wasn't speaking loud enough, or basically he was censoring my femininity, my softness. Neither one of us really, I think, understood what was going on at the time, but looking back, I can definitely see what was kind of happening. It caused me to be just really insecure and really uncomfortable. Church was a place I could go. My gender, my sexual orientation, none of those things were even really on my mind at that time in my life. And it wasn't something that was brought up in church. It wasn't something that was talked about. So it was kind of a safe place for me to just kind of be. I actually felt cool at church. I did a lot of theater and Bible trivia, and I was saving people, for Jesus, and I got baptized at 16. And I was a total Jesus freak. I loved church. I loved the people at church. I was in church 2 or 3 days a week at least. And I loved it. But once I moved out of high school, I moved out to Phoenix, Arizona. I got involved with the church right away. I went to a non-denominational church. It was a big kind of mini mega church. It
Mm,
got before there was a mega church, or
yeah.
before I knew about mega churches. So like, there was like 1,000 or 2,000 people in the congregation at each service. And I mean, my hometown was 3,000 people. So
Mm,
it was a big, like, it was just a big jump for me. And I got into theater there, and I got really involved in the kind of youth-ish, like young adult group. And but I wasn't out yet, and I hadn't realized I was gay at the time. Um, and like basically when I was 19, I got infected with HIV. Um, I found out 9 months later, not long after I turned 20, and I just barely came out to myself as like a gay man at that time. I had had a girlfriend who left me because I wouldn't be sexual with her, and it really hurt her. And I loved her and I cared about her deeply. And I was really, I just felt awful that I could cause somebody that much pain. And I really needed to figure out what it meant to be gay. And so I got a job at a gay bar to learn how to be gay. And so like I cocktailed and bartended and did all those sorts of things because I'd never really been around gay people, or I just had no, um, I just didn't know what it meant to be. And the only thing I did know was just kind of like hearing that, it was bad, not necessarily from church and stuff, because they just didn't talk about it, but definitely at home. My dad had a lot of not so kind things to say about gay and queer people. So I was definitely really scared about accepting that part of myself. And HIV diagnosis came the first time I ever got tested. The first time I ever could have got HIV, I did get HIV. I just really didn't know. I didn't know anything. I was always told to be concerned about pregnancy. That was not a concern at the time. So I ended up getting HIV. And it was 1999, which was right after new medication had come out. And it wasn't as scary of a time to get HIV. But for me, it might as well have been like 1981 or something, because I just didn't know anything. And the only thing I knew was like the movie Philadelphia. Um, Once I was diagnosed with HIV, it really kind of forced me to kind of like come out about it, I guess. And so like I came out to my family. I told my family on Mother's Day, which was just horrible timing. Um, and they all responded in the ways that you do. And then I wanted to go to, like, church was normally the place that I would go, when I was struggling with life. And I just couldn't bring myself to tell them that I was gay and that I had HIV. And it was very, it broke my heart. I remember actually going to the church, like during the off time, and went to like the sanctuary. And I remember just like bawling and just being really hurt and just being like, I can't bring this here. Like, I can't come here anymore. Um, I don't think, and I felt like maybe God loved me anyway, but that was still kind of the thinking, was anyway. And I couldn't understand how God could, but I also, so it was just like, there was this like at a moment where I just couldn't wrap my head around God and God's love and understanding for me. But I had some sort of like thought that it'll make sense later, like that I don't and so I just kind of, I stayed away from church. I stayed away from God in the ways that I had been with God before. And that's when I started doing drugs and alcohol, because drugs and alcohol, they softened the blow of life. My dad was a drug addict and alcoholic, and I knew he had a really rough life, and he had a reason to use substances, right? And I finally had that reason. And so I was kind of like, it was a very conscious decision. I was like, I need to start using drugs because I can't deal. And I can't go to the things and the places and the people that I had always gone to. And so drugs and alcohol really saved my life. and they gave me a life that I could never have had on my own. It really helped me to get out of myself and to explore myself, and put me in this community of people that were more like me in other ways. And they really taught me like just so much about myself. Um, and there was, God was in that so much, like, but I wasn't fully conscious of it. And then, yeah, I mean, and then I ended up, after 10 years of drinking and using, at like 29, I got sober. And that was the first time that I saw queer people, and I saw drug addicts, and I saw people who I thought weren't eligible for God, who wasn't worthy for God. We're talking about this God or this higher power in this life that they were relying on. And they were living these lives that I didn't think were possible for people like myself. And I just kept going back to those rooms, and um, I just really wanted what other people wanted. I think more than just not drinking and using, I really did want God. I just didn't know how. I wanted spirituality. I wanted to connect with myself, but I just didn't know how. And these people taught me how. And eventually I made it to a Christian church in Chicago, the Urban Village Church, when I was living there in my like mid 30s, early 30s. And that's where I ended up there by accident. The pastor that was preaching that day was like a gay man who was a recovering drug addict. And he was just like preaching this word that was like just for me. Like, I was like, this is for me. I'm not supposed to be here. Like, this was not like, I didn't come here for this. I'm here for a work thing. And I'm just bawling. I'm just bawling next to this person. And the next thing I knew is I went every week for like a year or two. And through that process, I cried for months and months and months and months. And it was really important for me to show up as who I was, as a queer, flamboyant person, and also be surrounded by godly people, young, old, straight, Black, brown, just a diverse group of people that really helped me heal. And though I maybe didn't necessarily take up the cross, so to speak, and become a Jesus freak, I definitely was able to like heal from a lot of that. So sorry, that was kind of a long question, a long answer, but
I love it. I love every single word. Thank you.
uh-huh.
Beautiful. Yes. I love that you mentioned Urban Village Church, because I've been involved with that church myself. And that's actually how I met you. I met through Urban Village Church, and when they were promoting your podcast,
Mhm.
which this is going to be involving our next question. Let's talk about your journey into starting a queer chaplain.
Okay. Yeah. So about, I think it was about 8 or 7 years ago, I was living in Chicago, and at that time, I would have been about 6 years sober. I was I was involved with Urban Village Church. I was in a very good place spiritually. I was just like living and just so full of like spirituality, and just really just in a really, really, really good place. And I ended up getting a phone call from my family that my nephew, who was 3 months old, who I'd met 3 months prior, Wyatt, was in the hospital, that he had stopped breathing in the night, and that he was in the ICU. And I grew up in a little town where my family all still live, and so he had to be rushed 30 miles to the hospital and then air flighted to another hospital 130 miles to get to Boise. And I was able to get within 8 hours. It was crazy that this happened, but I was able to get on a plane and get back to Boise, Idaho. And I remember um, getting to that ICU and getting next to my nephew, and just looking at him with all these wires and these machines, and I was just like, I didn't know what the best result was. Like, I didn't know that if he died, if what condition he would be in. I didn't know, like, I didn't know if I should pray for him to live, if I should pray for him not to, like, I just didn't know. And I just remember just thinking, be still and know, like, this is God, like, this is a God thing. Like, this is bigger than me. This is not something that, whatever. And I was just like, I'm just going to be here for my brother and my brother's wife and my family and just show up, and I was like the queer, like, like odd person who just came into town. And then the next thing I knew, I was kind of in the middle of everything. And eventually after a few days, they were able to do an MRI, and they did, in fact, like he was brain dead. So kind of a trigger warning. This might be a little intense for some people around infant death, but we ended up having to take him off of machines. And when that happens, with babies, somebody will hold the baby once they do that. And so my little brother and his wife, I just offered. I'd always been really weird around death and dying, but for whatever reason, I was like, I'll do it. Like, if you want me to do it, I'll do it. And so my brother asked me to do it, and his wife, and so I did. And my brother was with me and my father. They were both standing next to me as I was sitting in a chair with my nephew. And then his mom didn't even want to be in the hospital. And yeah, it was just like, and they put him in my hands, and he took his last breath, and it was gruesome. And his heart wouldn't stop beating though. And his mother ended up coming into the hospital, and she got there just in time to hold him until his heart stopped. And I remember leaving the ICU and starting to wash my hands like you do because you're in the ICU. And I didn't want to. Like, I didn't want to wash him off of me. And I just felt his spirit in my arms. And so I like went out to the hall, and then like that's when I broke down. And I ended up getting a tattoo that says "Be still and know," because that's what we do in small towns. Like, we all went and got tattoos, like all of us. But I got "Be still and know" on my arm. And then I ended up negotiating, or like I was then between for my brother's wife's Mormon family. So like I was in the Mormon temple coordinating the funeral. I ended up singing at my nephew's like funeral because like the audio video, like the audio wouldn't work. So I just like sang, which I am not a singer, but like somebody needed to do it, and in the Mormon tradition, you hold a baby for viewing. And when people come in, they can hold the baby as well. And so like I took care of my nephew in that way. My family, they typically have a party and barbecue and drink and, let go of balloons and that sort of thing. And so like I worked with my family on that end. And it was just this like, it was just a moment in my life where like I could really just let go of myself and just show up. Like I wasn't in my head. I wasn't concerned about this, that, or the other. I just showed up. And there was a part of me that and I never felt so close to God. I'd never felt so sure. And there was a part of me that just wanted more of that. But also I didn't want to necessarily be in a hospital and working with babies because I was definitely traumatized. But I wanted to kind of find a way to morph my life and my experience of coming to find God and spirituality for myself as a queer, trans, sexual assault victim, HIV, all those sorts of things that took me away, and was kind of feeling like, well, maybe I can be present with people in an unbiased, like in a way to help people invite their spirit, their spirituality, their understanding of whatever into whatever challenge that they're going, a death and dying to self. I think that, that's a very like spiritual woo-woo thing, but like when we see ourselves differently than we did before. So I think identity around different identities, I think that's a death and a birth. And so I like to help invite people help people invite spirituality or their spirit into that process. Because I think oftentimes in my life, that was happening, but I didn't know that was happening and I couldn't call it that. And I feel like there's so much power when I can just claim that, no, this is spiritual shit that's happening right now. This is spiritual healing. This is spiritual whatever that's helping me through this, this situation. And so that's what really brought on being a queer chaplain. And, it's just kind of it just kind of went from there.
I love it. A queer chaplain was definitely so I found a queer chaplain during the beginning of the pandemic, during the lockdown. And I was like unemployed for 6 months because, I come from the hospitality industry. And those 6 months was definitely a time where I needed to like sit down and think about my spiritual journey. And fortunately, that's how I found a queer chaplain. Like somebody from Urban Village Church promoted you. I went onto Spotify, and I just have to say, your podcast has definitely helped me out, especially during rough times. So I really appreciate all the work you do. Thank you.
I'm glad you were able to find it and that it was helpful.
Yes. So along with a queer chaplain, there are two other podcasts that I also know you from. One of them is At the CCC. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so At the CC it's a video podcast that I work with a couple other co-hosts, Lulu and Anthony, here in San Francisco, as part of the recovery community during COVID and the pandemic. Access to going to meetings and community was very limited, and so I proposed that we did kind of a podcast to try to keep community connected and those sorts of things. And so we meet once a week and we just talk about topics of recovery. And we often like to, we say that where there are no outside issues, like in a lot of spaces, there can be a lot of rules or fundamentalism or however way you want to label it that can really sometimes get in the way of people's healing and their ability to be in a safe space. So we're like we're like racially diverse, gender diverse, sexual orientation diverse. And we just kind of share from our perspective different topics around recovery or while in recovery. So I think we've had like probably close to 30 episodes over the last year or so, maybe even more. And so, yeah, that can be found at the CCC, wherever you listen to podcasts or that sort of thing.
Nice, thank you. I was just listening to the most recent episode, and I have to say I love the chemistry all three of you have. It's very intense. I love it.
I really love them. And like Lulu and I, one of the co-hosts, we didn't used to get along. We have a long history. And so it's really cool that we very much respect and love. And like, I just see him so much more differently than I used to, and vice versa. And so we've been doing it the longest. And then we brought Anthony on recently, and Anthony's very much like, he's going to bring out notes and he's going to have definitions. And so it just adds a nice little, there's just a good variety. We get a little like catty with one another. We give each other crap, but we also talk really serious. We talk about some pretty serious things, I think, at times.
Yes. Other than you, Lulu would probably be my second favorite. Don't tell anyone.
I won't.
All right. The third podcast is something that I feel like a lot of us in our community, the Unitarian community can definitely relate to. And it's the podcast with your conservative aunt.
Mhm.
Um, let's talk about a Splintered Grace.
Yeah.
What inspired you and your aunt to start that podcast?
Okay. Yeah. Um, so my Aunt Tina, she is a conservative Christian woman who lives in Phoenix, Arizona, she's out in Maricopa, Arizona. And she grew up in the same town that I grew up in. She's like 8 years. I think we have 8 or 10 years age difference. She's older than me. But she took me to church when I was like a toddler. She was also like one of the first people to kind of leave the hometown, and potentially like she went to a tech school, and like she was my hero. And she was my connection to God, really, before I could get to God on my own, which has been a challenge of mine most of my life. I've often sometimes put people in place of God, or those people are my connection to God, or speak for God, or a representation of God. And so she was that person for me. She never said she would, she never gave consent. Um, but to me, she was that person. And so I just always looked up to her. And I was living with her in Arizona when I was diagnosed with HIV. And prior to that, I had told her I was gay. She was the second person I told her ex-husband, and then I told her that I was gay before I told my family or anyone. And when I told her, she told me not to tell anyone, and that it was just a phase, like I would get over it. Um, and like, don't like, just don't, like whatever. And so I took that in a not so great way. And our relationship just kind of started to sever from that point. And I was living with her. I was taking care of her 4 daughters. I was practically kind of like a big kid, like almost like I was taking care of them. I was taking them to school. I was teaching at their Boys and Girls Club. I was really, really involved in their lives. And then when this happened, I felt this severing. And then once I got away from church and like all that, the HIV, I really felt like I couldn't be with her. And I felt really judged by her. I assumed that she had a problem with me being gay or staying gay, that it wasn't a phase. And so like for years, it was different. We would maybe be at the same events, but we wouldn't talk and we wouldn't connect. And oftentimes I felt like I would like show up to her house with my husband, because I was married for a minute, and she would like be happening to have a Bible study, and so I always kind of felt like she was trying to change me. And I think she was praying that I would find God, right? Or that I would change for God. And she used to pray for me that way. And eventually she stopped praying that for me. She started to see that I was a godly person and I was a child of God, and that my sexuality, my gender, all that sort of stuff was actually part of the gifts of my spirituality. And it took me a while to actually really hear that from her. But she was able to kind of open up some space, I think, for us to eventually start to have a relationship. And at my 20-year anniversary of getting HIV, I went to Phoenix, Arizona to kind of like honor that time. And I met with my aunt. At that time, I was a bearded lady. So I had a beard and I wore a sundress, and she came and picked me up and we went to church. She actually took me to that church that I left almost 20 years ago, 20 years ago. And she went with me there. She wasn't even going there anymore. And I wasn't sure how she'd feel about it. Like even the fact that she picked me up and I was wearing a dress, I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. I had rhinestones on my face. And we went to the church. And as we got to the church, she stuck her hand on my knee. And she said, now, I don't know how these people are going to respond to you, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. So if you want to stay, we'll stay. If you want to go, we'll go. And we parked the car. We met up with her daughter and her daughter's husband and her kids, and we went into church. And when I got to church, I got like almost overgreeted. Like it was very like welcoming and really great. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm doing this. I'm scared of doing this, like, you know, whatever. And so we went in and we sat down. And I remember we were sitting and, you know, they were singing. And I'm not really a big singer or anything. Sometimes I'll stand up and whatever, but I'm just not. and this woman tapped me on the shoulder, and I looked at her and she looked at me, and she had like sparkly stuff on her shirt. She was an older Black woman, and she had like these sparkly stuff all over her shirt. And then she pointed to the rhinestones on my face, and she pointed to the sparkles on her shirt, and she smiled. And then she started singing to me, and the song was "You're Blessed, We're Blessed, I'm Blessed," you know, something like that. And so she's singing to me, and then I'm singing to her. And it was like this moment again where I'm like, I'm not supposed to be like, what is happening here? Like this person is like seeing me and celebrating me in a way that I didn't think was possible in a church. And I felt like she was that person for me in that moment. And for some reason, I felt like I was somebody in her life that she wished was there with her. And I was kind of that person for her because I represented that person in some way. And it was this magical, beautiful, like experience. My aunt witnessed it and she's like crying over here, you know, and it was just a beautiful thing. And from then on, I apologized to her at the end of that visit. And I said, you know, I'm sorry that I thought so poorly of you. I really was scared to come. I didn't know how you were going to react. And like, it was just really scary for me. And I'm sorry that I thought so little of you. And she said, you came anyway? Like, you were that scared and you came anyway? And I was like, yeah. And then she said, you were right. Like, she told me I didn't need to apologize because I wasn't wrong in thinking that she was that person at one time, but that's not her now. And so we just made a commitment to meet once a week. Every week we talk, every week. Most every week we just get together and we talk for an hour and we connect. And after a couple of years of doing that, we decided to start a podcast to kind of help people learn how we were able to, still being, you know, a trans, femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, and a conservative woman who we see the world very differently and we believe things very differently. And yet we're able to not only just like tolerate each other, but actually love and connect and be encouraged and supported by one another. And so we kind of talk a lot about like how we got back together, and then we share how we stay in relationship. And then we also talk about, I don't know, we're in our fourth season. And so it's called Splintered Grace. I think it's just, it's been really good for us too, to really kind of challenge ourselves to talk about things that might be difficult, or to continue to show up for one another, even when it doesn't feel so great. And really finding a way to be able to say, I oftentimes have to assume the best in her, even though my tendency for a long time was to assume that she was still that person. And that somehow there was still like this trying to sneak in to change me or whatever. And we both have agreed not to try to change each other, but we both know that we will be changed because we are with each other. And so I've really come to learn a lot about myself, and her and people that I don't understand, a little bit better, I think.
Love it. Thank you. You could definitely tell that the love is still there. I love that, you know. Um, we do have a few minutes left. Would you like to briefly talk about lacing your narrative before we go to Q&A?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a big thing that I do in all the things, whether it's like I'm on a talk show or I'm a podcast or I'm meeting one-on-one with a person or I'm working a group with another person, I kind of have a strategy of trying to help people lace their narrative with a spiritual thread. And so I've done workshops, but also in my interview styles, I'll often go through a similar path. And so usually what I'll do is I'll talk with people and I'll ask them, what did you learn about spirituality as a child? Like, what were you taught? Who taught you this? You know, like ideally for a week, you would really meditate and write on it and like daily and really think about how did you learn about God or spirituality or whatever as a child? And then the next step would be like, so when did that change? And why did that change? And what was happening? And then, you know what I mean? Like, what was your response to that changing? And then part of it was, so there's like childhood. When did that change? When did it like, I guess, when did it kind of come back into your life as well? And then kind of even talking about an ideal, like, what is it that you want to have? Like, maybe it's not something you have right now, but, and again, it's like, I think the chaplaincy part is like, it's not about my spirituality or my beliefs. It's about you and your spirituality and your beliefs that are going to help you, like to help you, you know, and through that process, because I've still really been trying to figure out that for myself too. When oftentimes God fails me, and it's not God that fails me, it's my understanding of God that fails me. And when I'm in conversation with other people and I hear about their experiences, I then can begin to see a God or a power great enough to even be there for me. And to allow me to be able to continue to expand and express and grow. And so, you know, a lot of these conversations are, to be honest, like I need them. Like I need to be able to talk with people and hear how they believe and how they understand things to be, so that I can, because what I know and what I can imagine and what I can understand isn't really enough sometimes. And I often there's more for me to gain from difference than there is from same. And so, but it also takes a certain, like, you know, there's a mindfulness that that's really important to happen as you start to go into those spaces and those places. And so I think I kind of lost my train of thought there a little bit. But another reason why I do what I do too is just like, I never saw me until I saw me in you. And so that's a lot of what I try to do. Is I interviewed 33 drag artists so far, all different like genders and expressions and ages and location. And part of that is so that people can see maybe where they can exist, because they maybe didn't think they could exist this way because of their skin color or because of their gender or because of whatever, their culture. And so that's really a lot of what I try to do, is just create a platform and a space in which hopefully somebody can see them. And I'm choosing to move to Idaho in 2 weeks because I want to be the adult that I needed when I was a child. And I can't do that in San Francisco or Oakland or Chicago. I can only do that in Idaho. And so as scared as I am to go, I know that it's where God would have me go. Yeah. And that's just kind of, I guess, where I'm at with that. So I'm open for questions or whatever.
Yeah, thank you. All right. Anyone who has a question, speak now, I guess.
I'll go. This isn't exactly a question, Bonnie. I think if more people had your attitude, this world would probably work better anyway. Your outreach, your welcoming, it's a terrific gift, and we really, really appreciate your coming today. I have a little problem. I went to my app store and couldn't find Splintered Grace.
Oh,
So any tips on that would be good.
yeah. Are you like in your podcast or?
Oh, no, I guess I did that wrong. Okay. You
Yes,
don't
you
go to
can
the
go
app
like,
store?
Yeah, you can go to Apple or Spotify or Anchor, any of those sorts of things. You also can watch it on YouTube if you want to watch it. You can YouTube at a queer chaplain, and you can just watch the YouTube videos as well.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words.
All right. Any other questions here?
Hi,
So I have a question. So-
How about Charlie, then Karen?
Okay.
Hi, this is Charlie. I live near UIC, so you know that Chicago.
Little closer to the computer, Charlie, to the mic. Little.
Hi. First, thanks for getting up at 4:30. That was very generous of you, and your beautiful spirit really shines through. So it was very uplifting, and so thank you for sharing your life story with us, which is so meaningful and matters so much. But I was curious a little more about your if you kind of a faith tradition. I know you talked about your aunt's faith tradition, and I was wondering, do you try to how do you say, like, if somebody asks you what your faith tradition is, or your aunt's faith tradition, how do you answer that? To show honor to the faith tradition, but also to be open to God's calling.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's just an honest, I try to be honest about where I'm at. I have, Christianity is, I believe that's my culture. Like that's what I've been raised in. That's what I've been, the laws, the world that I live in is deeply impacted by Christianity. And I have kind of this mixed love. I'm very challenged by being a Christian, though that is my tendency, like that is my nature, that is what I know. And so for a long time, I was really just trying to like, how do I see myself in the Bible? So like learning the Bible and hearing that there was a Black trans person and knowing that there were people of color and like just these different sorts of narratives and perspectives that came from the Bible, that was really helpful for a while. And now I'm just kind of at a space where that doesn't, sometimes I wonder, like, why do I have to see myself in the Bible? Like, why is that like the goal or whatever, like you know what I mean? Like, why do I have to exist in the Bible in order to matter or whatever? And so I've been kind of a little conflicted with that. And partially, I think because of being so traumatized by the Christians that we hear about, like on TikTok or media, or the people that get into my DMs, are always people telling me to repent, I'm going to hell, like, so it's really hard sometimes to like separate people's different understandings of Christianity and what they do with that. And so I've really been wrestling a lot with that a little more so lately, and really trying to find that I still feel like I'm connected with God. I still feel like, I pray, I light candles, I live in a way as which there is a God, and that I don't understand, that is loving and kind and wants the same of me, that wants me to experience joy most importantly, which is a really hard thing for me to just let myself be in. And so those are the things that I just continue to try to lean into, because the God that I don't understand, the religion that I don't understand, I believe and hope that that's what it wants for me. And my goal is to do that. And it's not in a way that it's just for me. It's like, because I'm living in that way, it causes others to get to live in that way too. And because others are living in that way, then I get to live in that way. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I wouldn't necessarily say I'm attached to a religion, but there is a lot of things about my Christian understanding and Christian teachings that I've learned that I love. My go-to, like, I'll listen to Christian music, I'll listen to hymn. I love hymns in church. I'll even read a Bible, and like, but I just don't let the Bible be my only place to help inform me on how to be a spiritual person, or how to connect with God, or how to be better in the world with myself and with others. So I
Thanks.
hope
And
that
I mean,
answers the
in some
question.
ways, in some ways, like it kind of sounds like me too, you know. So because we're on a journey, we're on a path, and
Mhm.
then, but I look forward to listening to the Splintered Grace, and also learning more about your auntie, because she doesn't sound conservative to me, you
Yeah,
know,
so
in the traditional sense.
yes, and she will tell you she identifies. That's how she identifies.
Okay.
And so, but I think like with any identity, like just because we're an identity doesn't really tell us that much about us. Just because you're a Christian, it's like, well, what is it that you believe? Or and so I think that's one of the things that's been really great is I could very easily just shut the door and be like, oh, you're a conservative Christian, so you must vote for Trump and you must hate trans people and you like whatever, like all these sorts of things. And that may or may not be true, but I need to have more of a conversation with her in order to do that. And she does share a little bit more of her views. And there are some very like major things that we do not agree on. And it's been very difficult, but we are able to at least talk about it a little bit.
Thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Charlie.
And Karen has a question.
Do we still have time? I know, Bonnie, that you have to go to another event. So we still have some time?
Yeah, I'm good for another 10 minutes or so.
Okay, so I just want for a comment and a question. I don't know if you're very familiar with our religion, but our religion is populated with many, many people that had very bad experiences as children in Christian churches.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of people that, I call it Christian PTSD, what they experience. But I'm really curious about your plans in Idaho. Are you thinking about joining or starting an organization? Like, what do you have plans, or are you just going and seeing what happens?
Yeah, I am familiar with the Unitarian Church. I've found myself there often. And in Idaho, I do plan on a queer chaplain is something. I left my job 18 plus months ago to really try to pursue this. I've been without a home for 10 months by choice in order to really try to pursue this. I've been traveling all over the US, visiting people I've known over the years, staying in their homes, eating their food, and also meeting new people and really just trying to find my place. Because it really just felt like I needed to leave my cushy little job at UCSF working in cancer research and do something different. And so I kind of did this journey to figure that out. And through this process, it was really laid on my heart and my spirit that that I needed to move back to Idaho. And that anything that I really wanted to do in my life or could do in my life, I could do from Idaho. So I try to do a lot of my work more on a national or international level now. And so I want to be based in Boise, Idaho. I want to be based in Idaho so that I can still do what I'm doing. Like I'm hosting a spiritual drag con in Chicago in October. I'm continuing to be a resource to trans people all over the US who get connected with me to talk about spirituality or transness, that sort of thing. And again, I can kind of do that from anywhere. But I really feel like it'll be really helpful. I feel like there's something I have to offer going back to Idaho. Since I left Idaho 10 years ago, 13 of my friends have passed to overdose or suicide. And I feel so lucky that I got away and I got to a space and to people to where I could survive and even thrive. And so for me, it's kind of an act of gratitude to move back home. And also, I believe that there is more there for me around healing, around growing, around learning. And I really hope that one day my father will talk to me again. I feel like me being home, that's going to be more likely to happen than not. And so I think that's really kind of there's a part of me that, my heart is still really broken by my father. I can allow him a lot of grace, thankfully, to my, my spiritual way of living. And I can't wait for the day, and I hope there's the day that my father will be in the same room with me again, and want to be there. So I just feel like that's more likely to happen there too. So I think that's kind of why I'm going to Idaho.
Thank you. That's very moving. And you're exemplifying the Jesus that I grew up with. So thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Dave has a question. Dave Becker.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to thank you, Bonnie, for your ministry, and just may love be with you and surround you in your journey to Idaho.
Thank you so much.
Dave is our ministerial intern, Bonnie. So he's in seminary now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you
So-
all so much for just creating this space, and holding space like this for a person like me. And I know so many other people different from myself and similar than myself that I'm sure have walked into your doors, whether they were the Zoom room or the building. And I just really love that there are people like you who are in the world, because without people like you, I can't be as great and lovely and independent or strong as I am. I'm not nothing without you. So thank you for inviting me to be here today.
Thank
Well,
you,
I think we
Bonnie.
all wish we could be more like you, Bonnie.
It just takes some rhinestones. And
No, I don't think so. I think it takes more than that.
What kind of glue
Thank
do you
you.
use?
Somebody, who was that? Was that Debbie?
Yeah, I was joking. What kind of glue do you use?
no, it's eyelash glue.
There you go.
Okay.
Anybody else with questions? Or anybody on telephone who wants to unmute? And
All right. So I know this is June. You are a real busy person. I know. So thank you for for taking your time to talk to us. Before you go, anything you would like to promote?
I mean, I think the big thing is the Spiritual Drag Con. I'm hosting the first annual Spiritual Drag Conference, and it's going to be in Chicago, in Lakeview. So we are looking for collaborators and partners, but we're looking to provide space for drag artists to perform spiritual drag performance, but also to hopefully receive spiritual care as well while they're at the conference. And so we are looking for chaplains and lay people and pastors to be there to speak with drag artists from all over the US and Canada, who might need someone to talk to because of their spiritual trauma, or maybe where they're at now or wanting to go. Because I've talked with a lot of drag artists that felt like they've had to give up God in order to do drag, or vice versa. And that's not helpful thinking and living. And so I think that's really something I'm really, really excited about, is this first annual Spiritual Drag Conference. It's not just me, there's 18 other people from all over the US and Canada that are also helping put it on.
Nice. What days are they on again?
It's October 7th, 8th, and 9th.
Okay.
And you can go to aqueerchaplain.org, and all that information, all the stuff that I'm doing and working on is all there. I do have a Patreon, so if folks feel like they want to help support me on the regular, I have a way you could donate $3 a month or $20 a month or $200 a month or whatever, and that just kind of helps me eat and travel and continue to do what I do usually for free, and keeping it accessible for the people who really hopefully need to hear from a person like me.
Nice.
Or the people that I talk to.
Sounds great. Thank you.
I think we're going to say goodbye and thank
Yes.
you to
Thank you
Bonnie,
so
but we
much,
have a
Bonnie.
little bit more of service going.
Yes.
So if people can stay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank
you.
you.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride Month.
I would like the new people who are joining us today. Thank you so much for coming. Over the summer, we're only on Zoom every Sunday at 10:30. But every other Saturday, the next one is in 2 weeks. We do have food pantry at the church. And Karen, could you outline a little bit what goes on at the church on those every other Saturdays, please?
Okay, so the garden volunteers work on that day too, so that they can harvest vegetables for the food pantry. And they usually start at 9 o'clock. And then the pantry and the volunteers start setting up the pantry at 9 o'clock. And then at 10 o'clock, the pantry opens and it closes at 11 o'clock technically, but I see the volunteers helping people who show up a little bit late, but don't tell anybody that, so they show up on time. So, and then about noon, we start a luncheon. And yesterday, Praise Temple provided the luncheon, and we will be providing the next luncheon. And we're going to order catered food from MacArthur's, if you like MacArthur's food. Okay.
And nobody has to pay, right? It's
Oh, yes, good point. Thank you, Debbie. Yes, if you are willing and able to make a contribution to help pay for the food, that's fine. We also have that in the drop-down menu on the website where you can make donations, but no one is required to do that. It's pay what you wish.
And the whole idea is to have church members come and neighborhood people come and Praise Temple people come, and you don't have to be a volunteer, right, to come.
Oh, yes, another good point. Yes, it's not that the luncheon is for just the volunteers. It's for everybody, you know, that we come in contact with, everyone from our church and from Praise Temple that participates in the garden and the pantry, because we have volunteers that are not members of either church. And then also we invite the people who attend the clients at the food pantry. So pretty much if you're hearing this, you're invited.
I thank you so much, Karen. And I think now we'll go through a quick joys and sorrows. Debbie Montgomery, you had a joy. Yes,
I didn't put one in, but it was a
oh, I'm
joy.
sorry. I thought you were the one who mentioned the pantry, yesterday's pantry.
Oh, well, yes, it was a wonderful day for sure. But I didn't put it in there. Somebody's reading my mind.
Okay. Well, thank you for all your work, and thank you for everybody who works on the garden and the pantry. And my joy is I wasn't at the pantry yesterday because I was at Berwyn's Juneteenth celebration, which was a lovely event. And I had a table, Moms Demand Action. It's a group working for sensible gun laws. And these lovely people, I've been involved with this group for like 2 weeks, and these lovely people from the park came to help us. And it was a wonderful, wonderful event. They were real impressed with the people. And we had so many people come and talk to us. And gun laws in this country will change. It's gonna happen. So anybody else who had a joy or sorrow to share today? Happy Father's Day to everybody.
Deb, David, I need to leave the meeting. I'm going to turn the meeting over to you now. You will be the host.
Okay, thank you.
We have company coming for lunch.
All right.
We're supposed to do the offering. I think what we'll do is I'll just try to post in the Zoom if anybody for anybody, I mean, in the chat for anybody to see if they want to make an offering. And then we have our closing words. I don't know if people are going to be able to stay for chatting afterwards, but we can. Gabriel, why don't you do the closing words while I post in the chat if anybody
Sure.
wants to make a donation?
Of course. So this is a portion that I found on the Blue Notes. I know some of us have the Blue Notes